Hey folks, it's Bear Gardener, and it's time for another new playdeck guide. This time we're going to look at the German main nation. As ever, I am a Cards Content Creator, a member of the Cards Contributor Program, advocate for new player content, and general provider of guides for new players. As of this point, I have so far, after the changes in the latest expansion, which was Covert Operations, done a updated new player's basic guide and a guide to a US main deck, which you find on the same playlist this is on, or in the links. And this time I'm moving on, thanks to a little bit of input from my Discord and YouTube, to Germany is the next nation that people want to see a starter and then improved deck for. The deal. I will provide a starter deck which will only use cards which you will have guaranteed availability for. So if you joined the game at or after Covert Operations, you are guaranteed to have the cards needed to make the base deck as long as all 5 of your main nations are at nation level 12. If all 5 of your main nations are not at level 12, I strongly recommend that 1, you check out my new player guide, and 2, you make sure that they are before you go further, because it gets you the best crafting and cost-free starting collection in the game, which makes this much easier. If you joined the game before Covert Operations, then your starting collection will look different, because at Covert Operations, the level 0, as in starter decks, and the level 12, nation level 12 decks that you are awarded changed. And I believe will remain the same unless something major needs changing in the future, which is good for me because it means these videos should have some longevity. So, that's the deal. You'll need your 5 nations at level 12, and then you'll be able to build the base deck. I will talk through that base deck, I will explain the tactics of that base deck, how to play it at low levels. Then I will talk about a late game version of that deck, which will only use the rewards that you will pick up on your nation on the way up to level 100. I'm not going beyond level 100 because by the time you get there, lots of things will change. You'll have lots of different cards in your collections and you'll be able to do different things. So that's what we're going to focus on. Important note, your main nation card crafting will be covered in that guide, but your allied nation crafting is primarily covered in your allied nation and the guide that I've done for that. The 5 decks that I am providing are designed to create a collection which feeds into each other so that all of these decks are playable and advanceable together, thus giving new players the best possible experience, because you can play all the different nations and have decks that are effective. Also, finally, the late game deck is not a top meta deck. By level 100, you will not have anything approaching the collection in all likelihood for it to be there, and if you do, you'll have found these cards. There are a limited number of elites and specials that you can run without finding them in packs or crafting them otherwise. More advanced guides would be a different thing, and will probably get done, and I'll certainly talk about tweaks that I think you can make. Those of you who've watched my frontline deck will notice I don't talk about tweaks that you would make, but that's because for the frontline deck, you're actually capable of getting to pretty much its final form without any more help by level 100. It's a very clean and efficient to craft deck. The late game deck for Germany, a little bit more complex, so we'll talk about that when we get there. Anyway, that's how this is going to go. And the next thing I will do is take you into the game client and introduce the bare bones Germany Tank Doctrine deck. And here we are. This is my base deck for Germany. It is Germany with US ally. This, as I said, only uses the cards that you have available from your level 0 and level 12 decks for all 5 nations. If you're missing cards, it's probably because either your collection, your starter decks came before covert operations, or you have not yet got all of your nations level 12. See my previous comments in the introduction. Let's talk about the deck. This deck is all about using small, relatively inexpensive tanks and buffing them to get you a wide board position and finish off your opponent relatively quickly. And we've got a little bit of ramp in there to give us some late game sustainability. The deck is relatively fast, but is still in its nature a mid-range deck, which means that at times it is going to trade. It is not pure aggro, but it is substantially more fast-paced in its general approach than, for example, the US Frontline deck was. Right, we go through the deck card by card, talk about what's going on with it, and why the cards are in there. First card on our list is US Ace. This is a 0-cost order that gives a tank or infantry +1/+1. It's pretty decent value, and we're running a couple of them mainly because we have spaces at the minute. This is not a card that's going to stick around. I don't often include orders that are just buffs unless they do something very special, which we'll talk about later. But for the moment, this gives you a very cheap way of buffing a unit that you currently have on the board to give it a little bit more survivability and help it trade more actively with your opponent. Dive bombing. This is a 1-cost German order. Deal 1 damage to an enemy unit, set its attack to 0 until your next turn. This has lots of utility early in the game. Late in the game, it's not so often played because there are different, more effective control and removal tools. But honestly, early in the game, when you're going to come across a lot of very aggressive players who are putting all of their eggs in one basket and just buffing up one big unit and throwing at you, this can be amazing, because if you flick this onto that unit, it has an attack value of 0, which means that you can hit it with your own unit as much as you want without taking any damage. And more importantly, it can't deal any damage even through your opponent's next turn until the start of your next turn. There's a very effective way of slowing someone down. Also, it's quite good if you've just got a unit that's got 1 damage that's giving them some advantage early. You could, particularly against someone who's using an aggro Japan deck and puts down, for example, a Type 94 TK early, pushes it to the front line, hits your HQ and gets the first buff on it. If you got this in hand, it's 1 cost to just destroy that unit. Has some utility. It isn't staying with us all the way through, but it is, used well, quite an effective tool early in the ranks. I encourage you to learn to use it. Combined Arms. This is another card that won't stay with us. As I talked about previously, I'm not usually a fan of running orders that are just pure buff. But Combined Arms early in the game is an incredibly potent card, and we're certainly going to make use of it. It's 1-cost order. You target a friendly tank, and that tank gets +1/+1 for each unit type you control. So, there are 5 unit types in the game. Infantry, tanks, artillery, bombers, fighters. So the maximum bonus you can get from this is +5/+5. That's highly unlikely, but a lot of the time you'll be getting at least +2/+2 or +3/+3, and that's good value when you put it on a tank, particularly a fast tank. This is for freedom. This is a special US card. This is an incredibly strong card. This card is a 1-cost order. It gives a unit +1/+1, but it also draws a card. This card will be staying with us, and actually we will be picking up another one later on. The reason being, as I said earlier, I don't normally like running orders that just give buffs. I want to run orders that give buffs and do something else. This fits that bill perfectly because card draw is always good. We always want to be able to draw into our deck so that we can find the cards we want to operate with. So this card's great, and it's going to be around for a good while. Panzer IIA. This tank is a reliable, small tank with what I consider to be ideal early game stats for pressure. By that I mean it's one cost, one op cost, and has blitz, which means that you can put it on the board and move it forward for 2 credits, and if you've got 3 credits, you can even attack with it. It has smokescreen, which means if you are forced to put it down without being able to take advantage of blitz, at least your opponent can't trade it out with units. You have to target with an order. And it has 3 defense, and 3 defense is an awkward number for most early game to deal with. Putting it in a great position, because then if you manage to get +1/+1 or +2/+2 on it from somewhere, it continues to be a solid, awkward body. This is a theme. This is not the best of the tanks, or the one that we're going to be using the most, but you will make use of this early on. It is a decent body. This is the M8 Greyhound. It is from our US ally. We are running 3 of them, and this is the American cousin of the Panzer IIA. It has identical stats, except for the fact that instead of smokescreen, it has, while in the front line, your units in the support line have +1 attack, which can be useful if you've got aircraft or artillery in the back line that are actually attacking, but it's not a major thing for us. But as with the Panzer, we love this for blitz and the 1-3 stat line. More US ally. This is the War Machine. This is a 2-cost order, and it says gain 1 extra credit slot. So you pay 2, and then next turn you have an extra credit slot that stays for the rest of the game, and it stacks. This is a ramp card, which is to say it ramps up your availability for value, and it can be very useful if you have nothing else to play on turn 2, because it can give you much stronger turn 3, because turn 3 is instead turn 4, because you have an extra credit slot. Good card, you will make use of it, and it'll be with you for a while, because it's one of those cards that you probably won't cut until you have something much better to put in its place, because in the end, a little bit of ramp can be good. Too much ramp leads you into a different archetype, but we can make use of some of it. 59 Panzer Grenadier. So this infantry unit is 2 cost, 3/3 body. It says Panzer Grenadier can move and attack in the same turn. Doesn't have blitz, but once it's on the board, it functions like a tank. But 1, it's not a tank, so you can't hit it with tank buffs. 2, it doesn't have blitz, so it's quite slow. We will make use of this early in the game, because it is at least a good utility tool, but it will be leaving us pretty quickly when we get more upgraded cards. This is one of those cards that you probably trade out fairly quickly for different cards that have better upgrades depending on how you get on with it. You might keep it for longer. Depends on how you get on with it. I know some people really enjoy this early in the game because it is a good body, and 3 attack is not to be sniffed at, but I find it very slow. The Panzer 35T is here. We have 3 of them, and we'll have 3 of them in the late game deck. And actually, if you go past late game and into top meta decks, you'll still have 3 of them. The reason being is this is quite possibly the strongest tank in the game. Pound for pound, as it were. This is a 2 cost, 1 op cost, 2/2 blitz tank with deployment. Reduce the operation cost by 1 if you control an infantry, which you want to. At a 0 operation cost as a 2/2 tank body, this is insanely good. It's really strong. Once you start stacking buffs on it, it's amazing because it is free to use. As long as you have an infantry on the board, the turn that you put this down, you can move and attack with it. And you can attack with it every turn afterwards. Because it's free, it has no operation cost. We run 3 of them, we will keep running 3 of them. These are a really good, if you can pull this off early in the game, this will give you really strong early advantage. Afrika Corps Now, the Afrika Korps is going to be its own conversation a bit later on. This is an elite that you are given with your level 12 deck. Every nation gets their own version of this, and they all do the same thing. They're all 2-cost orders, and they all say, use one of 3 random elite German, or whatever nation you are, units, and to add to your hand. We'll talk about this in detail later, because you'll need to know what units you might see, and what to do with them. But you'll keep this card around until you have better elites to put in, because it gives you access to an elite unit. But in the end, this will, unless you're... I mean, this card does still see play at higher levels. It doesn't by me. I don't like the randomness. But there are some very good German elite units. So of all of these cards, this one is pretty high on the list of ones for value, because there are some really good targets in the pool, as we'll see later. 22 Infantry Regiment. This is a German special card. It is a German special card that we will be crafting a second one of. And it will be with us the whole way through, even into the late game, and this is another card which does see play at top level, because it is an engine for card draw. So it is a 2-cost, 2-1 infantry, which honestly, the stat line is basically irrelevant. What's relevant is, as long as this thing is on the board, if you control the front line, at the end of your turn you draw a card. Card draw is amazingly good. 2-cost to start drawing and keep drawing cards until your opponent does something about this is great, which is why it gets used as often as it does. Also, it's infantry, so it counts for activating the deployment on your Panzer 35Ts, also relevant. This is the Panzer 38T. This is a 3-cost, 1-op cost 2-3 tank. It does not have bits, but it does have deployment. Draw a card. This is just good value. It's a 2-3 body that you can use later. It's targetable with your tank buffs. It has only 1 operation cost, which is acceptable. And you get to draw a card for playing it. There's nothing to complain about. You're going to be using this for a good chunk of your time in this game, because we like card draw. Panzer 3L. This is another elite that you are given in your early decks. It is a 3-cost, 2-op cost blitz tank. It's 3-5 and has +1 attack for each non-tank unit type you control. Again, as before, with combined arms. This basically comes with combined arms for its attack only stacked on it straight away. So in theory, if you had all 5 unit types, this would be an 8-5. Most of the time you're going to be deploying this as a 5-5 2-op cost blitz tank, which isn't half bad. It's just a bit slow at 2-op cost, but it's workable. We can make use of it, and as long as we have the credits to operate it, it can be very effective. It also serves as a target that our opponent often feels like they have to deal with. Hopping back to the United States, this is the M18 Hellcat from our allies. This is a 3-cost, 1-op cost 4-2 tank with blitz. We like this a lot. We like it even more because it deals double damage against tanks, so this can remove an enemy tank that has up to 8 defense, as long as it doesn't have heavy armor. And honestly, we'll use this for that quite often. The other thing that we will occasionally use this for is just winning the game, because dropping this, moving it forward and hitting for a total of 5 credits, if you can get a buff on it, can finish your opponent. Speaking of buffs to finish our opponent, there's Blitzkrieg. That'll be familiar if you've watched the Frontline video, and it's here for the same reason. It gives a 3-cost order that gives friendly units in the front line +3 attack, and they operate for 1 less until the end of your turn. This is a really good finisher. Once you're in a good position, it can just give you a burst of damage to bring your opponent down. Can also be used if you have a very adverse board position and your opponent is about to pummel the front line and take it off you, to remove some of their big threats and slow them down. But as a general rule, I advocate it to win the game when you can. We run 2 of them. They'll be around for a good while. The Panzer 3J, a limited card. We are running a couple of them. They are 4 cost, 2 op cost, 4/5 blitz tanks. Now, they're okay, but again, 2 op cost is a big ask for us. We're not flush with lots of credits, so this is not a long-term friend for us. But early in the game, it's a big enough body to be effective. And it can trade very well, and if it's expensive. But if you can get it into the front line, and then even if you're not operating it, your opponent is having to trade into it, that will become the interesting kind of value for them, because your opponent will have to waste quite a lot of credits and units removing these. JU-87B Stuka. This is the bomber that we're running in the deck. It is a 4 cost, 2 op cost, 3/2 bomber. And it says the enemy must discard a card each time Stuka deals damage to their HQ. The card isn't staying with us for long, but early on it can be a useful annoyance, and certainly at lower ranks, opponents can get very disheartened with a tool on the board that makes them discard cards. Not critical, but usable. Panzer III-H. This is a special tank. It is a 4 cost, 1 op cost, 2/4 tank, and it has deployment. Use them to draw a card from the top 3 of your deck. Put the rest bottom. This is a very good card because it's tutor. It lets us pick which card we want to draw, and also lets us pick which cards we want to put to the bottom. Good card, you'll make good use of it, and it's a decent body. It doesn't have blitz, but it does have 1 operation cost, as opposed to some of the other heavier tanks which cost 2 to operate. The Alliance. 5 cost order that gives all your non-USA units +2/+2. This is just another really useful buff that we can drop. It won't stick around forever because it is very expensive for what it is, and you won't necessarily get to use it that often. But if a game does drag on, this can make the difference. When you get into a war of attrition, this can definitely make the difference in the lower ranks, because +2/+2 is not nothing on all of your German units, of which you have many. War Bonds. This is the second half of our ramp package that we are using early in the game. Is a 5 cost order, quite expensive, but it gets you 2 extra credit slots, and you draw an additional card at the beginning of your next turn. As I've said before, card draw is always good, and ramp can be useful for us. Again, this isn't sticking with us forever, but early on it is a useful thing to fill out our deck with something that has some function. And again, this can be a card that can turn the tide if games go late, or if you get really bad draws and you get to turn 5 and you really don't have much to do, but you've got this in hand, at least it draws you another card and gives you extra credit slots to work with. Finally, we have the Tiger 1H. This is a choice that I went backwards and forwards on, but since we were ramping and have some excess credit available, and since this is in the starter pool now, even though it is incredibly expensive and can't blitz, it is an 8 cost, 3 operation cost tank. It is an 8/8 body with heavy armor 2, which means every time it takes combat damage, not order damage, but combat damage, it takes 2 less. So if this is hit by a 3/3 unit, the unit deals it 1 damage and blows up. It also can't be pinned. At 3 operation cost, it is an incredibly expensive thing to do, but it can be the difference late in the game, and it can also have incredible intimidation value, very much like the L can. Is it sticking with us? No, we don't really want to be using tanks that are this expensive, but early in the game you might get some use out of it, and we shall see. Again, you're not keeping it long term, but from a limited collection, it gives you a big intimidating body with which to really put the pressure on at the back end of the game, because it is also very survivable unless your opponent has some form of powerful removal order. And usually by the time the game's gone late enough that you're deploying and using this, they don't, or they've used them, at least in the lower ranks. Doesn't see play at higher ranks because it is big and heavy and slow. Okay, so let's talk about Afrika Korps, because I said I would. The Afrika Corps is something I said I would speak about, because you need to understand the pool for this card to have any value for you. So what we're going to go and do is we're going to use the collection to have a look at what's available. So we're going to set units only, because this can't get us orders. We're going to go German only, obviously, and we're going to go elite. Then we're going to press the thing that shows us the whole collection. The most important thing to understand about this card from the outset is this is not a German elite that you own. This is any German elite currently active in the game that is a unit. You will see 3 of these cards. There are in fact 18. You will see 3 of them and pick one to add to your hand. We're going to talk through them and discuss why you might or might not want to take them. We're going to start with the 158 Natschub. This early game is amazing. This is a 1 cost, 4 operation cost, 0 attack, 4 defense body with smokescreen. It doesn't do very much at all, except for its card text, which is incredible value. It says gain 2 credits for the first enemy unit destroyed during your turn. So as long as you're attacking and destroying an enemy unit, trading, which we're going to be doing quite often early in the game, you're gaining 2 extra credits to operate with. This thing is exponential value. It is one of the strongest force enhancing cards in the game. It is well worth considering if you see it and you're early enough in the game that you'll get value. Later in the game, probably not, because it needs to really be around for 2 or 3 turns to have really good value, although frankly, it pays for itself the first time you trigger it. Greif. Speaking of paying for itself, Greif is a 1 cost, 1 operation cost, 1/1 tank that is elite. And it is elite because of its card text, which is your other tanks operate for 1 less. This means all of your 1 operation cost tanks are free to operate. Played at the right time, this wins games, because this accelerates a winning turn. You can spread out a massive board of tanks that are very expensive and very heavily set and buff them, and then be like, I've only got 1 credit left, as your opponent takes a deep sigh of relief. Then you play Greif, and all of your 1 cost buffed tanks now are 0 op cost. Smack into your opponent. This thing is incredible. It is all about timing with Greif, but Greif is, you don't expect Greif to stick around on the board. Your opponent's going to destroy this as soon as they possibly can. But on the first turn you use it, it doesn't matter because they don't get the opportunity outside of countermeasures. 8 Fallschirmjäger, 2 cost, 1 operation cost infantry. It's 3/2 and it has Blitz and Fury. Fury means it can attack twice. Can be useful, but it's honestly with only 2 defense. That means that it needs to hit, the first thing it hits needs to have 1 attack and 3 defense for it to be able to destroy it, and then the second thing it hits needs 3 defense for it to have good. But used well, it can have good value. In the right situation, this can be incredible, but the truth is, unless you're actually holding this in your hand, it's very hard to time that situation. You're probably not picking this card on a regular basis. 96th Infantry Regiment. This is a 2 cost, 1 operation cost infantry with Blitz. 4/4, and it has very, very particular card text. It says, when you deploy another unit, destroy this unit. This is not really anything to do with our archetype. This is not the way that we function. It is highly unlikely that we're ever going to take this unless we are completely strapped, have absolutely nothing on board, pop Afrika Corps, and this is the only thing that we've got that has a body and blitz. That's about the only time that you do this. Heinkel HE115. This, on the other hand, you may very often want to take. This is a 2 cost, 1 operation cost Blitz bomber, or 1 attack, 2 defense. Nothing special. However, whenever it attacks, you add Spoils of War to your hand. Spoils of War draws 3 cards from your deck and lets you pick one to add to hand. Shuffles the other ones back in. It's an order. It's there, in fact. It's 2-cost order. Choose and draw a card from the top 3 of your deck, put the rest on bottom. Spoils of War, kind of like the Panzer. It's basically identical to the Panzer H that we were talking about earlier. So you get the top 3 cards of your deck, choose one of them, and then put the other 2 on the bottom. It's tutor, and in this case, Heinkel keeps generating it, plus it's a bomber. Very well played card. Speaking of a very well played and often played card, this is the 15cm autocannon. A 3-cost, 1-op cost 3/3 artillery. However, in addition to being a decent piece of artillery that you can use later, it has, when you deploy a unit, deal 1 damage to the enemy HQ. Just great value because you're going to be deploying units. Something your opponent... It's what we call a must-answer card. When this hits the board, your opponent needs to do something to either mute it or remove it, otherwise it's just giving exponential value. Bloman Voss BV-138. You don't want this. We're not playing countermeasures. I'm not going to loiter on this card for any length of time. Dornier DO-18G. This is a 3-cost, 2-op cost 2/5 fighter, which has a text effect we actually don't mind at all. Units you deploy move into the front line, if possible. This can save you a lot of credits when maneuvering tanks, because every time you drop a 1 operation cost tank while this is on the board, it moves to the front line for free. You can still use another credit to attack with it, because it still has blitz and it's still a tank. Just something to be aware of. This card can be really good. You do have to play into it carefully, but used well, this is an incredibly good card. Panzer 3L, we don't need to discuss this, it's already in our deck. If we're taking another one, it's for the same reasons that we've got this, but honestly, we're probably not. The Stuka 87G. This is the big brother of the Stuka that we're running in the deck. A 4-cost, 2-op cost 3/2 blitz bomber, and it becomes veteran as soon as an enemy ground unit is destroyed. For example, by this thing dealing 3 damage to it on the turn that it's deployed. Why would you care about this? Because as a veteran, this gets the enemy discards a card when you attack and destroy a ground unit. So every time, note, not with this bomber, period. Every time you attack and destroy a ground unit, your opponent discards a card. Played well, it's an incredibly powerful card. Right, 119 Grenadier only works if you also have the 35 Grenadier. They feed into each other in a weird combo format that we are never going to play and have literally no interest in. Moving on. Comet. This is an incredibly highly played card. It is very often included in top-end Germany decks because it is a 6-cost 4/2 blitz fighter with 0 operation cost, and at the end of your turn, it goes back to your hand. Which means unless your opponent has countermeasures or you accidentally run it into a guard, it can't die. It's just deal. As long as your opponent does not have countermeasures or a guard, this is 6-cost, deal 4 damage to your opponent's HQ every turn. Quite often, when you see this card, you're probably going to want to take it. Because even if you can't use it now, it will give you an incredibly potent finisher late in the game. Do be cautious if you're going against German countermeasure decks, or heavy British Guard decks, or Finland countermeasure. There are ways that this can be destroyed, but it is quite hard to play around, and at low ranks, many people think this card is impossible to deal with. It's not, but it is strong. Right, speaking of cards which at low ranks people think are incredibly and insanely overpowered, this is the Panther D. It is a 7-cost, operation cost, 7/6 heavy armor 1 tank. incredibly slow, incredibly expensive, and its sole redeeming feature is its card text, which is when this unit attacks, the damage it deals is also dealt to the enemy HQ, which means every time this thing hits something, it deals its full attack value. Note, you buff this to 10 attack and hit a 1 defense unit, it still dealt 10 damage, which means you will in fact deal 10 damage to the enemy HQ. Pretty potent, but I personally find it incredibly slow. If you can make it work, it can win games, and at low ranks, if you take this and drop it, you might find opponents just can't deal with it. At higher levels, it's just not really that good, or played that often. The ME262A Schwalbe is a 9-cost 7/5 fighter, and its operation cost 3. However, against a specific problem, it is one of the most potent effects in the game, because it has deployment, destroy all enemy air units. There are some air decks around at the moment, and if you are facing one, worried that they're going to get a good board position and happen to see this, knowing that you will have the credits to play it, can be useful, but it's very situational. Panzerzug 61, BP 42. I'm not going to loiter on this. It's kind of a card that you'd have to build around if you're ever going to use it. Don't recommend you do so. Leopold. This, on the other hand, if you see it, is a card I highly recommend you consider taking if it's getting late in the game, or it looks like the game's going to run late. Leopold is a 10-cost artillery piece. It's 6/4 though, so it does a lot of damage, but it is 3-op cost. However, it also has deployment, send all enemy units to their opponents, to their owner's hand. Now, this is huge, because if your opponent has, 5 units on the board, and 8 cards in hand, and you play Leopold, only one of those 5 can go back to your opponent's hand. The other 4 are discarded, and when your opponent draws next turn, a 5th card is discarded, and then your opponent just has to play them all again, and also find a way to get rid of Leopold quickly, because 6 damage, ignoring guard, is not nothing. Leopold is an incredibly strong card, and wins games if played in the right situation. If you see it, and you think the game might go long, seriously consider this card. King Tiger. Yeah. I mean, sure, it's impressive. It's 12 cost, it's 10/10 with heavy armor 2, and your support line cannot be targeted by enemy orders or deployment effects. That's everything in your support line, including your HQ. But honestly, it asks too much. 12 cost to deploy it, and then 4 cost every time you want to operate it. By the time this would win you the game, you've probably won it a different way. At best, it's a win more and show off card. Really not that worth thinking about. That's the full pool that you can get from Afrika Korps, and my recommendations about what you consider taking. Let's go talk tactics. So that's it. That is the base deck. The tactics are pretty standard. Look to operate quickly with light tanks, cheap tanks that are very effective. Get buffs on them when and where you can. Trade for good value. And when you have the opportunity, hit your opponent's face. Their HQ, I should say. But on a regular basis, we'll get turns where you can just have some free swings at HQ, and you should probably think about it. The deck wins basically by going relatively wide quite quickly on the front line, and then hopefully utilizing one or more combinations of buffs to become really effective, deal lethal damage. You'll do well with this, and it can evolve with more crafting into a very, very strong deck, especially at the moment. And we'll talk about that bit. Right, welcome to the late game version of this deck, which is the version that I recommend craft towards. I'll talk about how you do that in a bit, but first of all, we're going to talk about what changes in this deck, and why it's good. The tactics don't. The deck's tactics remain basically the same. We're still looking to utilise early tank pressure and buffs. The flavour of those buffs does change a little. We're going to start with a defining card for this deck. This is Blitz Doctrine. Now, by the time you are watching this, it is possible that this card may have changed a little. Might be a bit more expensive or somehow otherwise have been slightly adjusted. Because at the moment, early on in covert operations, this card is arguably a little bit too strong. However, I do expect it to remain a good value card in a tank deck because of what it does. Talk more about the risks and rewards of crafting when we get to crafting. But for the moment, Blitz Doctrine is a 1-cost order, and it says, develop a German light tank, add Contest Doctrine to your hand. So develop is a mechanic in which you will see 3 cards, very much like Afrika Korps, from a fixed pool of cards, in this case, German light tanks. That is any German tank which costs 3 or less. Now, many of those tanks, from a historically accurate point of view, would not be considered light. However, for the game's purposes, and the text might change on this card at some point, they are what constitutes light tank. Any German tank that costs 1, 2, or 3 credits. You'll see 3 of them, pick one of them, and add it to your hand. Pretty good in and of itself. However, you also get to add Contest Doctrine to your hand on top. Contest Doctrine is another order. It costs 3 credits, and it says, develop a German medium or heavy tank. That's any tank that costs 4 or more from the German pool. And you'll see 3, add 1 to your hand. But the real kicker on this is not the tank, which quite often, unless you're very lucky, is a tank you won't end up playing. The real kicker is, once you play Contest Doctrine, tanks you deploy this battle, that is for the rest of the game, get +1/+1. All of your tanks are buffed on deployment. This is huge. Even if you only get 1 of the 2 of these that you're running off, this is huge in a value trading mid-range. This combination of orders is incredibly strong, and as I say, by the time you see it, it might change. I imagine possibly to cost a bit more, but it's probably still very good. The 158 Nakshub. We talked about this when we talked about Afrika Korps, and I said it was good. It's in fact so good that we craft it. Because this is just value. This is an amazing turn 1 play, because it sets us up to be gaining immense amounts of value. As I discussed before, it is just gaining 2 credits to the first enemy unit you destroy in your turn is insanely value. For freedom, we craft a second one of these because it remains one of the best buff cards in the game. We also craft 3 738 Jaeger Regiment because this gives us a 1-cost Blitz infantry with an operation cost of 1, which is very good from the point of view of giving us something to trigger our 35Ts, but it also has a deployment effect. 1/3 body, by the way, which is also, as I mentioned in the initial deck discussion, really good value and something we appreciate a lot in this deck. It also has deployment. Target a unit, enemy or friendly, and you draw a card when that unit is destroyed. Card draw is amazing. Things are going to be destroyed. Need I say more? And even if you're playing this on turn 1 and you don't get to trigger the deployment effect, it's not that bad. You can still activate a tank off it. You'd prefer not to have to do it. Nakshub is much better, but still. Panzer 2A, this has stayed with us for all the aforementioned reasons, and we've crafted 2 more of them. We're running a full 4. The Stug 3F. So this is in now, is not, I believe, in the initial deck. This swaps out as you go up. Because it becomes better once you can get more buffs on it. You could sub it out much earlier if you wanted to, but I certainly recommend as you go on later in the game and become more comfortable using situational cards that you use the Stug 3F. The reason it's not in the base deck is that it is a more complicated tool to use, because it doesn't have Blitz, and it's there for a particular reason. It is a 1 operation cost method of getting rid of a tank with 4 defense. It deals double damage against tanks. It can be good. We still have Afrika core. All of the previously applied rules still there. Only obviously now we've got some of the elites in our deck. 22 infantry, for all the aforementioned reasons of draw engine and the fact that we are contesting the front line and trying to keep it on a regular basis. This is really good value, so we have 2 of them. Panzer 35T, again, for all of the previously discussed reasons, we keep this card around because it's incredible, and continues to be these are the beating heart of our deck. War Machine, we've gone to 3 of these in total, and still using them for the same purpose, which is to give us a little bit of credit acceleration. This plus Nakshu means that we have some really decent credit acceleration tools, and being able to cheat out or gain extra credits can be very powerful, especially if we have things that cost a bit to operate. 15cm autocannon. Unsurprisingly, given what I previously said about how good this card is, we've crafted it. Because we're going to be deploying units regularly and dealing damage to the enemy HQ when we do, it's just good. Still got the Panzer 3L, still doing the same job. Eventually we'd like to replace it with something better, but we are not in a position to trade out a lot of elites. Blitzkrieg, still doing its job, still there for that big burst of damage. From the US, we have picked up, because our US frontline deck will have crafted them for us, interlinked crafting is a thing, the M10A1. This is a 3-cost, 1-op cost 4-2 tank. It doesn't have Blitz, but it does have deployment. Suppress a target enemy unit. Suppress resets a card back to its base stats. It puts operation cost and its defense and attack and everything else back to its base. It just debuffs it completely and removes all card text card. So the card no longer has any of its subtypes or its active card text. This is an incredibly powerful tool. You will use it regularly to turn off things that are giving you problems. Hellcat, still hanging out, still really good for tank removal, bigger tanks than we use the Stug for, and still really good to do a little bit of last damage. Panzer 38T, a great draw option for us, so much so that we've crafted an extra one, that we're running 4. We've kept the Panzer 3H, we've not crafted another one, we really don't have the special cards to do so. If we picked one up, we'd probably remove one of the Stugs. We can talk about that at a different point. You'll find you make substitutions, but it's still good. Panzer 3J. We get a couple of these. These are expensive Blitz tanks. But beggars can't be choosers. We do not have the resources. These are cards that would eventually, in a top-end version of this deck, be exchanged for elite or special cards of higher value. For the moment, these are solid. If we can ramp up our credits enough or cheat them out with Naktube enough to be able to pull off operating this, even if it's just getting it to the front line, it gives the body that our opponent has to deal with. And finally, we have the 20 Panzer Grenadier. This is an incredibly potent card in our deck. Probably one of the best special cards we have. right up there with Blitz Doctrine, in fact, and possibly more consistent. We'll see. Anyway, 20 Panzer Grenadier is a 4-cost, 1-op cost, 3/3 Blitz infantry, which in and of itself is okay, but its text is incredible. When you deploy this card, you add a Panzer 35T, yes, the incredibly good tank, and Combined Arms, the buff card that we liked but didn't keep because we don't like running it just as a card, are added to our hand for free. So if we play this on turn 8, or rather when we have 8 credits, because we might get there sooner, we get to put this down, add 2 cards to our hand, then we put down the 35T, which reduces its op cost to 0 because we do have an infantry unit, we just deployed this. Then we put the Combined Arms onto the 35T, which is +2/+2 because we control both an infantry and a tank, we just deployed them. And then we have all the credits necessary to push this to the front line or attack with it to clear something out the way, and then use the 35T to do the same thing. This card is incredible. Having 2 of them is just good value, and you will use this card a lot. Note, this deck has become very light. We're not running 5, 6, and 7k units. If we get them from anywhere, we will be getting them from Afrika Korps. But really, we don't want to, because our intent is to win much, much faster than that. Like, way faster. Because we are concentrating on making best use possible of our cheap and quick-moving units, in particular the 35T, which we have access to a total of 5 of, because we get 3 in our deck, plus 2 from 20 Panzer Grenadier, and then we might get some more from Blitz Doctrine. This is a very rapid frontline kind of methodology. It's become a little bit less mid-range, a little bit more aggro. Don't get me wrong, once you get your Blitz Doctrine buff up, this thing can still trade well, and you've got some great tools for buffing tanks. But the heart of this deck is just... At this point, it just gets faster as we craft into it. We have to do something that we've already gotten used to doing at the lower ranks, but we do it faster and faster. And that's it. That would be my summary of the tactics for the deck, which we'll cover now. Late deck tactics are basically everything that we were doing with the early deck, but faster. Really, this is a... the archetype is sometimes referred to in cards as Hinds, because there was a tank called Fast Hinds that gave buffs. Anyway, we don't need to talk about that, but you will hear this archetype sometimes referred to as Hinds, which is basically fast tank aggro. And this is a Hinds deck, but it is a little... It's a kind of a slightly heavier set Hinds. It's got some more weight behind it just in case the game goes a bit long. But on the whole, this will often win you games very, very quickly. In particular, if you can get Blitz Doctrine in hand, get it played in the first, and get it and Contest Doctrine played in the first 3 or 4 turns, you've probably got a very good chance of winning because it's that good. The maths may have changed by the time you're playing this deck. It's probably still very strong, but it may have changed. Anyway, that's the general tactics. Focus on getting early pressure out. You want to be able to get early tanks out and buff them. And you want to make use of your lighter infantry. The Nakshub and the Jaeger regiments are really good value for activating 35Ts until you can start dropping 20 Panzer Grenadier towards. For freedom onto a Jaeger regiment early can also be insanely strong. Turning a Jaeger regiment on turn 2 into a 2/4 and drawing a card, don't have and haven't already found your Blitz Doctrine or some tanks to activate, that's a scary turn. So consider it. Anyway, that's it. That's how I would go about playing this deck. And now we'll talk a little bit about how I would go about crafting this deck and how I recommend you do. So, well, go look at a spreadsheet. And here it is in all its glory, a spreadsheet that talks about the crafting path I recommend for this deck. So, you can see that I have marked on this every wild card that you get for your German nation levels. Now notice, I'm not including the crafting of your US allies in there. Again, these are designed to be interlinked, so my assumption is that you will play this and the other 4, or at least some of the other 4 decks, at the same time, leveling up your nation levels to help your crate progress and other things, so you'll be able to tap into the crafting that you've already got. It's just a more efficient way of crafting, because otherwise you only have cards that are noted on this spreadsheet as open wild cards, like, for example, the limited card that we get at level 33. Level 33 is a limited open wild card, so you could use that to craft on here. You could use this to craft a US unit if you so wish, but I don't recommend that you. Right. So, early on, first thing we'll get is a limited wild card at level 14. I recommend the Jaeger Regiment because having better quality infantry and cheaper infantry to activate our tanks is good. Level 16 we get 2 standard wild cards, more Panzer IIAs, because they just give us more pacey tanks. Then at level 19 we get 2 more standard wild cards, and really we're only spending 1 of them because we've got some really good standard cards already, unless there's something you find that you like more. And this is where we craft Panzer 38T, or more card draw. Level 20, we're back into more card draw again. We use our first Special Nation wild card. Despite the potency of 20 Panzer Grenadier and Blitz Doctrine, I really do recommend that you get the 22 infantry first, because no matter how good a card is, if you don't see it, it doesn't matter. Then we're ignoring standard wild cards, because when you don't need to craft more standard cards. Level 24, we get another limited wild card. Jaeger Regiment again. Exactly the same happens again. Level 33, that gives us our complete set of the Jaeger Regiment, for all the aforementioned reasons. Then at level 37, we get our special wild card, and we craft 20 Panzer Grenadier. Now, I went backwards and forwards on this, because Blitz Doctrine is very, very good, especially as of the time of me making this video. But Panzer Grenadier has been around longer, and I suspect Blitz Doctrine may well get changed. Not enough to make it not good. I suspect it will still be very good. But depending on when you are doing this, and your personal preference, if you are more all-in, you might want to use 1 or more of the 2 Panzer Grenadier, 20 Panzer Grenadier special wildcards to craft a Blitz Doctrine. You might want to use this for a Blitz Doctrine, then get a 20 Panzer Grenadier, and then do the same again later or something similar. They're a bit interchangeable depending on where you feel you are. At the moment, my personal recommendation is 20 Panzer Grenadier for its just sheer consistency, because we're not sure what, if any, changes will be made to Blitz Doctrine. Although, to be honest, people are still arguing for changes to 20 Panzer Grenadier, so we'll see. So, at level 39, I'm throwing in a bit of a wild card, and this is one of those things where I'm going to talk about things that you can do if you choose to do so. We've already got our own deck set, and we're currently, I am recommending the use of the Stug, because there's a lot of tanks going around at the moment, and the Stug does double damage against tanks and is a standard card, so you can get 4 damage to a tank for a standard card, which is not bad. Another option is a limited card that you could craft, which is the Flampanzer. Now, the Flampanzer is another tank. It is a 3-cost 3/3 tank. It doesn't have Blitz, but it is a good body at 3/3. It is also 2 operation cost, so it's quite slow. but it does have a very potent deployment effect if used well, which is deployment, destroy a target enemy unit with cost 1 or less. Now, this can be situational, because it depends on whether you're against a deck which is using a lot of units that cost 1 or less. But, for example, in a mirror match in this game, you could target Jaeger regiments or the Nachschub with this and destroy them, which can be incredibly potent, and Flampanzer, if you've got Blitz Doctrine on it, is a 4/4 body, or if you drop another buff on it. I didn't include it in the main deck because it's a personal choice thing. I like it. I think it's a really good deck choice. So much so that I would probably run it over the Stug. But it can be a bit more situational. But for me, I would probably craft 3 of them just to have them, because I can use and not use an experiment. See whether you get on with them, see whether it's doing well what you're playing into. You find you're not playing into a lot of things that are playing on cost units you want to destroy, you probably might want to put something else in. But I put this in as a recommendation because we have quite a lot of spare limited slots in this crafting guide. So I recommended 3 of them, just as a thought. Level 47, as I said before, this is 20 Panzer Grenadier, but see my previous comments about whether you might want to use one or other of these, or both of these, depending on how you feel for Blitz Doctrine. Level 49, we get our first elite. Now, of the 2 elites we're crafting, I recommend Nachschub first, because the Nachschub has exponential value gain played early, because of course it can gain us credits time and time and time again, which can increase our board state and function. Level 51, 3rd Flampanzer. See my previous comments, and we now reach the point whereby all of the standard and limited nation wildcards you've got give you the chance to go see other things that you might want to try out. Look at other tanks and options that you might want to give a go at. As with anything, you can be flexible in this. The archetype is pretty flexible. I think it's pretty solid as I've outlined it, but you don't have to follow absolute rules. A special nation wildcard at 70, and then again at 87. These are the other 2. In my case, I've got them as Blitz Doctrine, but you could go the other way around, or swap and change with the 20 Panzer Grenadier. I say the only thing I recommend you don't swap and change is going early for one of these over the 22 Infantry, because I think the card draw will have better value for you in the long run. And then we're clear all the way down to level 100 when we get our second elite, which I recommend the 15cm autocannon for. Then I've got this little list here. These, now I talked about the fact, as I was talking about the deck in general, that there are a lot of elites that we would like in the deck if we can find them. Unlike the frontline deck, we want this deck to grow even further than the level 100. We can't get to our final form at level 100 because we want more elites, and we do, for this to reach its true potential. I have listed 4 elites here that I heartily recommend you consider. So we discussed the Heinkel, the HE-115, which is the bomber that gets you Spoils of War, thus getting you card tutoring, which can be incredibly powerful. We discussed the Dornier, which is the bomber, the fighter rather, that when you deploy it, everything that you deploy after it moves to the front line, which can be incredibly credit efficient. We discussed the Comet, which is the fighter that goes back to hand at the end of it and can be an incredible finisher. We did not discuss Admiral Hipper, because Admiral Hipper is an order, but it is an order I seriously recommend you consider, and certainly if you are lucky enough to open it in a pack, I recommend you immediately and without forethought fling it into your deck and throw something else out. Because Admiral Hipper is amazing. It is a 5-cost order, and what it says is send a unit to its owner's hand. The enemy does not gain a credit slot or draw a card next turn. This is an incredibly potent tempo control. It's a huge hit to your opponent's tempo and economy, and you should absolutely get hold of it as soon as you can. None of these four, however, or Reich research, which you could look into, but see my video on researches as to whether they interest you or not. I don't cover them here because they are very specific. None of these, however, are strong enough for me to recommend them over the autocannon and the Nakshub for sheer value. Although Admiral Hipper is close, there is, in my opinion, a decent argument for taking Admiral Hipper at level 100 and picking up the autocannon later, depending on your playstyle. The others I would pick up later, but realistically, this is a very solid start to a deck that can get a lot better. And this is a theme with many beginner decks. The frontline deck is a little bit of an aberration in that sense, in that it kind of hits its, as I said earlier, its final form much more efficiently. This deck, you've got plenty of space after 100s. These are cards to look out for if you've got access to wild cards like that. Anyway, that's my crafting guide for this deck, and what I think is the best way to go about it. Summing up, this is, for me, one of the stronger nations in the game right now. Germany is very strong right now, has a lot of very good cards, and this deck plays very heavily into the tank archetype, which, at the time of making these videos, very strong. I think this is an enjoyable deck to play. It is a nice balance in many respects between the deck that I recommend for US and the deck that I recommend for Japan. Those two being a mid-range and an outright aggro deck. This is aggro, but with just enough body to get away with a bit more later game fight. You'd think of it as a midpoint. Genuinely, I think this is a great deck to play, and again, as with all of my starter decks, it interlinks nicely with crafting, and playing this alongside US Frontline is an absolute blast, because they feed each other so well, I will say that. This deck and US Frontline are an incredible combo to play, because you're crafting as you go along on these nation levels cards which feed into the other archetype, which gives you so much more acceleration and freedom, and also you have two really reliable decks that play slightly differently. And between them, they are an excellent way of learning the basics of the game, which is kind of why they ended up being the first two videos. Well, that and the fact that this was one that my supporters voted for on YouTube in the community. I threw up a poll for a day, and at the end of it looked and saw what was popular, and this was, and that's why I recorded this. If you want to be part of that, of course, follow me, subscribe, all of that stuff. You can also check out my Discord, link down below, and come chat to me there. As ever, I hope you find it useful. I hope, as a new player, you enjoy the game. And as always, stay well, be good human beings, and I will catch you next time.